Finally, a decent Ghostbusters sequel. So Ghostbusters Afterlife is the sequel to the original Ghostbusters, I guess? Basically, you don't need to have seen anything but the original. It kind of feels like they erased everything after the first movie and just made a sequel like 40 years after the original. And I actually think it works. Even though the characters are different from the original cast, there's enough Ghostbusters elements and themes to make it feel like an actual sequel. So in the past 40 years, obviously technology has improved. But I love that they kept the same ghost-busting tools and equipment as in the first movie. Except this time around, they don't really feel as clunky or as cheesy. Even though they managed to maintain the same look, the way they used heavy sound effects made them feel like serious ghost-busting tools. But the movie doesn't start out right away with ghost-busting. It actually takes like 45 minutes for any ghost-busting to actually happen. And honestly, I didn't mind that, because the characters were super interesting and so were their stories. And the story of a family being forced to move out of their home and having to move to a new sketchy home left by a distant relative isn't anything new, especially in horror movies. But the film plays with this trope in a really interesting way by making it a comedy. I really wasn't expecting this movie to have the depth that it did. Each of the characters' motivations were warranted, and they didn't make any stupid decisions. Personally, I loved the main character, Phoebe, played by Mckenna Grace. She absolutely stole the show. She had the most interesting story, and her natural charisma made her really likable, which is hard when you have a bit of a pretentious know-it-all type of character. Her dad jokes and deadpan delivery were absolutely hilarious, and her back and forth between Paul Rudd was just great. And Paul Rudd does what Paul Rudd does. It's just hard not to like him. The only criticism I had for him in this movie was that I just wanted to see more of him. He doesn't show up until about 20 minutes into the movie, and even after that, he disappears from the movie for a bit, so it was a little disappointing that we didn't get to see more of him. I thought Podcast was great, and his relationship with Phoebe was really, really heartwarming. He kind of felt like Phoebe's guy in the chair, you know? And then Carrie Coon was extremely charming, and her chemistry with Paul Rudd was a lot of fun. And I really want to see more of her in different things because I felt like her character was lacking for her level of talent. I will say that the only character I felt was forced into the movie was Finn Wolfhard's character. He kind of felt like he had his own story happening outside of the main plot, and they just used him to bring back the Ecto-1. So anytime they needed to bring back the car, they just brought him back. And honestly, I don't even really remember what happened to his character or the girl that he was into. He kind of just felt like a B story to fill out the movie's runtime. So sometimes it's hard to tell whether something in a movie is made for the sake of fan service or if it actually works. But I think the way they used the old Ghostbusters imagery worked really well. Even though the effects of the original Ghostbusters movie are pretty dated by today's standards, they managed to bring back those same ghosts and equipment and gave them an upgrade without really ruining the aesthetic. And the movie does feel like an upscaled Hollywood version of Ghostbusters, but I don't think it really loses anything by having a big budget and better CGI. The use of practical effects mixed with CGI actually made the terror dogs feel like they're the same terror dogs from the original movie. Except now when it ran or moved, it didn't have these cheesy effects that ruin its intimidating factor, so it actually felt like an actual threat throughout the movie. And also, the mini marshmallow men were hilarious. I don't even care that they took the movie's pacings off the rails for a little bit. They were like little suicidal minions. I honestly could have watched an hour of those guys just getting into hijinks. So it turns out the movie is directed by Jason Reitman, who is actually the son of Ivan Reitman, the director of the original Ghostbusters movie. And apparently, Ivan sat in on the set and helped Jason a lot with this movie. And you can tell that this is a real passion project for the father and son duo. Each shot seems as though they put a lot of time, effort, and thought behind it. And I think this movie, like a lot of other movies that have come out recently, actually benefited from the fact that they were delayed due to the pandemic, because they had more time in the editing room. And you can really tell with this movie, the pacing is just excellent. Nothing feels too short or too long, and it really leaves you wanting more. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. It's not a top 10 movie or anything, but it's a really well-made movie that I think does justice of its predecessors. So if you like a lot of Ghostbusters references, witty dialogue, and some fun Ghostbusting action, then you should definitely check this movie out. On a scale of 1 to 100, I give this movie a 76. Thanks for watching. Remember to please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.